Gemini, impossible not to cry. The pact was broken. There is a sacred whisper in the air today, one that feels like a breeze brushing past an old scar you forgot was still healing. Something has shifted, and not just in your outer world, but in the very core of your soul. You've always danced between light and shadow, clarity and duality. But recently, haven't you felt that strange, aching weight? The kind of heaviness that doesn't belong to your curious, buoyant spirit? This message is not for the mind alone. It's for your spirit, the part of you that still believes in divine agreements, unspoken pacts between your soul and the universe. Gemini, what I'm about to share may stir something deep. And it may explain why you felt so emotionally frayed, why certain relationships have felt one-sided, and why, despite all your inner work, you still question your worth in the silence of night.
So, pause with me. Take a breath.
You are not broken, but something you once trusted has been. If you've ever felt like your energy was being siphoned, your joy quietly replaced by confusion, or your heart stretched in directions it never chose, this message is for you. This is not just a revelation. It's an awakening. If these words speak to something inside you, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Let's walk this healing path together, one truth at a time. Gate 1. The mirror was tilted. Gemini's invisible exhaustion. Gemini, you've often been described as the light-hearted communicator, the butterfly of the zodiac. Quick-witted, adaptable, endlessly curious. But very few understand the truth, that beneath your agile mind and radiant energy lies a soul that has been quietly carrying a burden too heavy for far too long. What if I told you that what you've been experiencing isn't just emotional fatigue, but the ripple of a sacred pact being broken? You didn't sign it with ink. You didn't speak it aloud. But the universe knows, it remembers. The agreement was simple yet divine. You would bring clarity through chaos, dialogue where there was silence, and harmony between the fractured parts of people and situations. In return, you would receive inner peace, reciprocal relationships, and protection for your boundless energy. But somewhere along the path, that promise fractured. And the break wasn't loud. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like a soft thread quietly snapping inside your chest. Suddenly, you were the one who always had to explain, to bridge the misunderstanding, to lighten the mood, even when no one asked if you were okay. Your mind kept spinning, analyzing, creating harmony for others, while your own heart was left in the background like a forgotten melody. People leaned on you, constantly, for your insight, your words, your energy, and slowly, without realizing it, your role shifted from being a messenger of truth to a container for everyone else's confusion. Have you noticed how tired you've been lately, even when you've done nothing wrong? Have you caught yourself shrinking your voice just to avoid tension? Or smiling when your spirit was actually grieving something you couldn't name? That's the wound. That's the place where the pact tore. Because you, dear Gemini, were never meant to carry this alone. There is a price to being the light in dark places. People see you shine and forget that you, too, are made of flesh, feelings, and fatigue. They come to bask in your brilliance, not always realizing that your glow dims each time they take without giving. What hurts the most, perhaps, is the subtle betrayal. You didn't expect perfection, but you did expect balance. If you show up for others, shouldn't they show up for you? If you keep your promises, isn't it fair to hope others will do the same? Yet the universe, the one that once vowed to protect your light, seemed to step back. And in its silence, you began to believe the imbalance was your fault. That's the danger of being a Gemini with a broken pact. You turn your sharp mind inward. You start to question everything. Did I say too much? Did I expect too much? Maybe I'm the problem. But no, my love, you are not the problem. You are the witness. You were the first to feel the imbalance in the room. The first to notice when a conversation turned manipulative. The first to sense when someone's affection was conditional. Your nervous system wasn't overreacting, it was trying to protect you. Let me ask you something now, Gemini. Have you been feeling invisible in your relationships? Like people hear your words, but don't feel your essence? Like you're speaking volumes, but no one really listens? That's not in your imagination. That's spiritual misalignment. And your soul is sounding the alarm. Because the original pact, your sacred contract with the divine, was never about martyrdom. It was about movement, dialogue, connection, curiosity. You were born to bridge worlds, yes, but not to be the rope others tug at to stay afloat. So what changed? Darkness, subtle and strategic, crept in. People and patterns began to feed on your light, not out of cruelty, but out of imbalance. And you, being generous and open-hearted, allowed it. Again and again. Because you believed if you just gave more, communicated more clearly, kept the peace one more time, it would all balance out.
But that's not harmony, Gemini.
That's energetic sacrifice. And your soul wasn't designed for martyrdom. It was designed for magic. Let's go deeper now. You've likely noticed this in your career too. You give your best ideas, adapt quickly, stay 2 steps ahead, and still, it feels like others are rewarded while you're left questioning your worth. You overdeliver and yet feel overlooked. In friendships, it's the same. You're the one sending the check-in texts, remembering the birthdays, picking up the emotional slack. And when you finally need someone, silence. These patterns aren't accidents. They're symptoms of a broken energetic agreement. And the saddest part? When the exhaustion reaches its peak, Gemini begins to disappear, not physically, but emotionally. You start ghosting your own desires. You avoid conversations. You suppress your own voice. That's not laziness. That's self-protection. Because you're done giving energy to a system that only takes. And here's what I want you to hear, loud and clear. You don't owe your light to everyone. Not every room deserves your spark. Not every friend deserves your forgiveness. Not every soul deserves unlimited access to your energy. The first act of healing is not to give again. It's to reclaim. Reclaim your time, your peace, your voice, your energetic sovereignty. The moment you say, no more, the universe listens. The moment you rewrite the pact, with yourself at the center, not the edge, everything begins to shift. New people appear, the kind who reciprocate, not just receive. New opportunities align, the kind that nourish instead of deplete. Your nervous system calms. Your inner world starts to sing again.
This is not punishment, Gemini.
This is the lesson. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to speak less and expect more. You are allowed to reserve your brilliance for those who reflect it back with reverence. Let this be your new covenant. You are not the fixer. You are not the emotional translator for those unwilling to learn your language. You are not a tool for balance. You are the balance. And from this moment forward, your energy is a temple, open only to those who knock with love, not entitlement. Gate 2, the sacred goodbye, when Gemini finally lets go. There comes a time in every seeker's journey when the road splits, not by force, but by truth. For you, Gemini, that moment is now. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or flames. It arrives quietly, like a hush at the end of a song. It's the ending of a cycle, and though it may feel like loss, what's really happening is sacred release. You've tried to hold on. You've twisted yourself into understanding. You've argued with your own intuition, convinced that things could go back to the way they were. You replayed conversations, justified behaviors, wrote forgiveness letters in your mind, but nothing brought back the balance you so deeply longed for. Because it's over. And somewhere in your soul, you know this. This part of your journey, this relationship, this role, this cycle, was never meant to be forever. It served a purpose, and that purpose has been fulfilled. What remains now is the ache of letting go. But Gemini, endings are not punishments. They are portals. I know you resist goodbyes. Yours is a mind that craves connection and continuity. You love to make sense of chaos, to bring harmony to duality. And yet, you are not here to force what no longer fits. There's someone, or perhaps several people, you've been trying to save. People you believed could grow with you if only you explained better, gave more, or waited longer. But here is the divine truth. Growth must be chosen. And not everyone chooses. It's not your fault. And it's not your responsibility to wait at the crossroads forever, hoping they'll catch up.
You are not abandoning them.
You are returning to yourself. What you're feeling now, this grief, this confusion, is not a sign of failure. It's the echo of your own heart mourning what you once hoped would last. The dreams you dreamed together, the loyalty you offered, the energy you gave so freely. It's sacred grief, holy sadness, and it deserves to be honored. Don't rush this part. Let yourself feel it all. Cry if you need to. Write it out. Burn the old letters. Revisit the memories, not to reopen the wound, but to understand the lesson. Because that's what's really happening here, a soul lesson. You see, Gemini, not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. Some come to activate, to trigger,
To teach.
to mirror the parts of you that still needed healing. That one friend who drained you, they showed you the difference between companionship and convenience. That lover who couldn't commit, they taught you that your loyalty is a treasure, not a test. That coworker who always took credit for your work, they revealed your worth doesn't require validation. It hurt. Of course it hurt, but it awakened you. And now that you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. Here's what's real. The goodbye isn't about rejecting them. It's about protecting you. Your soul no longer resonates with old frequencies. The conversations that once fascinated you now feel hollow. The spaces you used to tolerate now drain you. The roles you played so well now feel like a costume stitched from outdated expectations. That's the shift. That's the sacred rupture. And yes, it feels like death sometimes because a part of you is dying. The version of you who tolerated crumbs, who overexplained, who negotiated your needs to maintain peace, who feared being misunderstood more than being mistreated. That version is dissolving. And what's emerging is something luminous. You may feel raw right now, unanchored even, but that's what rebirth feels like. Before a butterfly emerges, the caterpillar disintegrates. It turns to mush, becomes unrecognizable. But that's where the wings begin. You, Gemini, are in the mush stage, and wings are forming. This is your sacred goodbye, not just to people, but to patterns. Goodbye to overthinking your every word. Goodbye to relationships where love felt like a performance. Goodbye to proving your worth through usefulness. Goodbye to the guilt that kept you small. Goodbye to the mask of the happy communicator when you were silently breaking inside. You're allowed to outgrow people. You're allowed to redefine what loyalty means. You're allowed to say, "This no longer resonates," and walk away. And yes, some will not understand. Some will accuse you of changing, as if that's a crime. But change is not betrayal. It's alignment. And your new alignment demands space, stillness, boundaries. Let this part of your journey be tender. Treat your heart like a sacred garden. Don't rush into new connections to fill the silence. Don't rush to explain your decisions to people committed to misunderstanding you. Let the old energy fade without resistance. Let the unanswered messages stay unanswered. Let the silence be the teacher. Because what's ahead, Gemini, is beyond comprehension. When you finally close this chapter, the universe will open doors that had been sealed shut by your old attachments. People who speak your soul's language will appear. Opportunities that honor your gifts will align. Peace, not performative, but deep, will return. But first, the goodbye. So take this moment. Light a candle. Whisper their name. Forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Not because it makes what they did right, but because it frees your nervous system from holding the pain. Forgive yourself too, for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for giving too much. You did what you could. You loved with everything you had. That is not weakness. That is divine strength. And now, Gemini, it's time to let go. Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally waking up. Gate 3, love beyond words. When Gemini meets the soul. Gemini, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt love that defied explanation? A pulse so magnetic it silenced your mind and awakened your soul? Perhaps it arrived quietly, like a whisper in the middle of an ordinary day. Or maybe it came in like a storm, unexpected, undeniable, and utterly life-altering. Whatever form it took, you knew, this wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. something ancient, something sacred. This kind of love doesn't come often. And when it does, it changes everything. Because as much as people say you live in the mind, flitting from thought to thought, conversation to conversation, the truth is, your soul has always been looking for something deeper. Beneath the quick wit and the clever words, there is a longing to be truly seen, to be met beyond intellect, to be held in a space where your dualities are not questioned, but honored. You crave connection that doesn't just challenge your mind, but stills it. Someone who understands your inner contradictions, not as flaws, but as the beautiful complexities of a spirit meant to bridge heaven and earth. And yet, how many times have you mistaken stimulation for soulfulness? How many times have you stayed in relationships that sparked curiosity, but left your heart starving? How many times have you performed love instead of receiving it? That stops now. Because spiritual love, Gemini, does not require performance. It's not earned through effort or charm. It's felt in silence, in stillness, in sacred presence. The kind of love your soul is calling in now is nothing like the ones before. It will not demand that you shrink or entertain. It will not confuse your worth with your usefulness. It will meet you in your fullness and cherish all of it. And here's the beautiful paradox. This love often arrives right after the sacred goodbye.
Why?
Because only when we stop carrying old, heavy stories can we make room for something divine. You see, the universe always wanted to deliver this love to you, but it was waiting for you to believe you were worthy, for you to stop settling, for you to become the version of yourself that no longer chases, but attracts, that no longer begs, but radiates. It may begin subtly, an unexpected conversation that leaves you breathless, a sense of déjà vu in someone's presence, a dream that feels like a message. Don't dismiss these signs. The soul speaks in whispers, not shouts. And when it arrives, it won't feel like fireworks. It will feel like coming home. This person will not complete you because you are already whole, but they will mirror your wholeness back to you. They will love not just the side you show the world, but the parts you hide, the overthinking, the doubt, the wild curiosity, the yearning. They will not fear your questions. They will hold space for them. They will not interrupt your tangents. They will follow them. They won't just hear your words. They will listen for the pauses in between. Because they are not here to consume you. They are here to co-create with you. This is spiritual partnership, and it's sacred. But let me offer a gentle truth. You must first become the kind of partner you seek.
And you're already doing that, Gemini.
By walking away from what drains you, by refusing to play small in love, by honoring your emotional truth, even when it's messy, by no longer mistaking attention for affection. You are aligning with the frequency of real love, not the love that plays games, not the love that withholds, but the love that liberates. And this kind of love doesn't always follow the timeline you expect. Sometimes it arrives after heartbreak. Sometimes it comes disguised as a delay. Sometimes it requires solitude first, not as punishment, but as preparation. Because spiritual love is not just about romance. It's about resonance. You may feel it in a soulmate, a best friend, a mentor, even a stranger. But wherever it finds you, it will open your heart in a way that logic cannot explain. And it will ask something of you. It will ask you to be present, vulnerable, honest. It will challenge the walls you've built to protect your sensitivity. It will invite you to trust, not just the other person, but yourself. Because you've always had powerful intuition, Gemini. You just didn't always listen to it. But now, your soul is wiser. You can feel when something is real, even if you don't have proof yet. You can sense energy shifts, even when no words are spoken.
Trust that.
The love your soul is calling in now will not bypass your boundaries. It will respect them. It will not take your energy, it will expand it. It will not confuse chaos for passion. It will offer peace as proof. This is what divine partnership feels like. It's not perfect, but it's aligned. You will still have challenges, misunderstandings, ebb and flow. But you will face them together with curiosity, not control, with openness, not fear. Because finally, You are no longer relating from your wounds, but from your wisdom. And that changes everything. So, if you're still waiting, Gemini, wait well. Do not lower your standards to fill a temporary void. Do not text someone who already showed you their inability to love deeply. Do not shrink your dreams just to fit into someone else's small world. Wait with dignity, with excitement, with sacred stillness. Because the love you are calling in will match your frequency, not your loneliness. And when it comes, it will feel like a conversation that never ends. A knowing without words. A yes that doesn't need convincing. Gemini, the universe never forgot your pact. It was simply waiting for you to remember the truth. You were never meant to love halfway. You were never meant to be the one who always gives, while receiving crumbs in return. You were born for soul-deep connection. And now, your soul is ready. Gate 4, the return of the voice. Gemini rises. Gemini, you were never meant to whisper your truth. You were born to speak stars into form. Somewhere along the way, they told you your voice was too much. That you talked too fast, felt too deeply, questioned too often. So you toned it down.
You turned your poetry into small talk.
You made your soul digestible, so others wouldn't choke on your truth. But the universe remembers what you were born to carry. Not just language, not just wit, but word, the sacred vibration that shifts hearts, awakens minds, and pierces illusion. The very essence of your power is not in how much you say, but in the frequency behind your voice. And that, dear Gemini, was the real threat to those around you. They weren't afraid of your chatter. They were afraid of your clarity. Because when a Gemini remembers their truth, they become unstoppable. And yet, you forgot, didn't you? Not all at once, but slowly,
silently.
Every time you were misunderstood and didn't correct them. Every time you chose peace over presence. Every time you watched your brilliance shrink inside rooms too dim to reflect it. You learned to doubt your own knowing. You edited your truth to avoid discomfort. You withheld your fire in exchange for approval. But here's what no one told you. Every time you silence your soul, the world loses something irreplaceable. Because your words are medicine. Your insight is sacred. Your questions are gateways. And the world is starving for what you've been hiding. But Gemini, it's not too late. There's something rising within you now. A power that no longer fits inside your chest. A voice that can no longer be ignored. And this time, it's not coming from your intellect. It's coming from your essence. This is not the voice that talks to be liked. This is not the voice that entertains the room. This is the voice that shakes the room. This is the voice of the sacred messenger. You were never just good with words. You are encoded with divine articulation. You can name things that others only feel. You can translate emotion into understanding. You can walk into confusion and speak clarity into existence. That is not an accident. That is your calling. But with great power comes great resistance. The reason you've been surrounded by people who didn't listen, the reason you've been drained by conversations that go nowhere, the reason you've felt muted in spaces that once felt familiar, is because your frequency is changing. And not everyone is supposed to go where you're going. There will be people who say, "You've changed." Let them. There will be people who say, "You're being dramatic." Let them. There will be people who walk away when you finally speak your unfiltered truth. Bless them. Your job is not to make everyone comfortable with your growth. Your job is to honor the mission. And the mission is this: to reclaim the sound of your soul and use it in service of healing, truth, and freedom, not performance. You are no longer available for shallow conversation. You are no longer available for roles that shrink you. You are no longer available for being the translator of someone else's chaos. From now on, you speak with intention, with boundary, with power. Because the voice that once begged for love now declares worth. The voice that once apologized for existing now commands space. The voice that once edited itself into silence now sings, unapologetically. This is your rebirth, Gemini. But unlike the quiet reinventions of your past, this one is loud,
raw,
radiant. And yes, it will scare some people. Because when a Gemini steps fully into their divine voice, masks fall. Illusions dissolve. False harmony breaks. Truth rushes in. But you're ready for that now. You've been training for this. The betrayals? They built your discernment. The goodbyes? They made room for real love. The silence? It carved the cavern from which your true voice can now echo. You are not who you were even 6 months ago. You are sharper,
Softer.
stronger. You no longer explain what intuition confirms. You no longer beg for clarity from people addicted to confusion. You no longer dilute your truth to avoid rejection. Because you've realized your rejection was never about you. It was about the power your presence triggered in people who weren't ready. And now, Gemini, the stage is clear. The mic is in your hand. The message is encoded in your spirit. Will you speak? Not just for validation, not for applause, but as a sacred act of remembering. Will you sing your soul's song into the spaces that have long forgotten what authenticity sounds like? Will you let your voice be the bridge between thought and transformation? Will you become the vessel again, not for other people's needs, but for divine truth itself? Because that is your inheritance. You are not just the zodiac's thinker. You are its revealer. You are not just the conversationalist. You are the oracle. You are not just the speaker. You are the sound of awakening. And when you use your voice aligned with your highest self,
You don't just speak.
you shift timelines. Conclusion: you are the voice of renewal. Gemini, you are not becoming someone else. You are returning to yourself. Not the fragmented version of you that adapted to survive, but the whole, radiant being who is born to connect thought and soul, idea and emotion, truth and tenderness. This journey, though carved in pain, was always a path to reclamation. You've walked through the gates now. Gate 1 revealed the hidden exhaustion of imbalance. Gate 2 taught you how to let go with grace. Gate 3 reawakened your soul's desire for sacred, spiritual connection. Gate 4 brought back the sound of your divine voice.
And now,
You stand on the other side, not broken but initiated. Not lost but realigned. Not silenced but sovereign. The universe didn't abandon you, Gemini. It paused so you could learn to hear yourself. And now it's offering again. Not just healing but rebirth. Not just relationships but resonance. Not just conversation but communion. But you must choose. Because the universe can only offer. You must say yes. Yes to boundaries. Yes to truth. Yes to a life that honors your sensitivity as a gift, not a burden. Yes to your voice, no longer edited for approval, but spoken from the center of your being. Gemini, don't miss the sign. Be the sign. You are not just here to navigate the chaos. You are here to alchemize it. So breathe deep. Stand tall. Let the winds carry this new version of you into the places your soul was always meant to reach. And if this journey has awakened something in you, I invite you, gently but with conviction, to like, share, and subscribe. Not because it's a routine, but because your voice deserves to be supported. Your healing deserves to be witnessed. And your energy deserves to be protected. The pact was broken, but you survived. And now a new covenant begins.
this is your time, Gemini.
Speak it into existence.